Hi, Kevin Yoder here with another episode of KevinYoder.tv. It's late summer, September 11th, 2015, and the summer market has been awesome in West Michigan. All sorts of home sales. Home sellers have elevated. Inventory remains low. Interest rates are stellar, 4%, and that's somewhat surprising, but they yet have remained. So we have a topic today called potential deal killers and how to fix them. So let's talk about that. And before I do, though, I want to remind you of a couple links on the video blog. One is a free market snapshot. That'll give you optics on what's selling in your neighborhood. If you think of selling a home and you want to know what your neighbor's home is sold for to give you a kind of good starting point. Also, what's also on the market right now, which would be your competition if you went on the market today. The market snapshot link will give you that. There's a free home search link, which will give you access to pretty much every home listed on the MLS. Not pretty much, every home listed on the MLS. It's a direct feed. And if you want to start looking at homes, that's a good place to start. Go on the site, register, create a custom search. A lot of great functions there. So let's talk about potential deal killers and how to easily fix them. The first on my list is, now these are all based on our experience this year. We had a lot of changes in the market, and the new market has brought with it some also potential challenges that we have been able to navigate through, but I'd like to share those with you now. In case you're faced with those situations, you'll know exactly what to do in advance. So this might be helpful. Number one, bad appraisals. Now, holy moly, the market's improved, and we all are forging ahead here, and we want nothing more than to have our sellers experience the benefit of an improving market condition. And I think everyone feels that way, except for buyers, of course. But when you go under contract and you have a home sold and everybody's happy, buyer, seller alike, you've all agreed on price and terms, and then the appraisal comes back and it's lower than what the purchase price is. That's happened several times throughout the year, and it's always disappointing to everybody involved. So usually it requires another negotiation. Half the time it results in the home coming off the market because the buyer and seller can't agree on the final sales price, and that's not good. What we recommend that the seller does is to make sure their agent is doing just a more detailed, a more thorough market analysis in order to make sure the home is priced right from the beginning to avoid having any potential appraisal issues later on. Another recommendation we've been making is get the home appraised up front. Take a third-party appraiser, appraise the property up front, and set the list price at appraised value. If you do it up front on your own, you're less likely to have an appraisal issue later on. Even though the appraiser is going to be a different appraiser that the buyer hires, it doesn't matter. They've used the same, very similar criteria. They use a scientific formula for pricing that property and appraising it, and the second appraiser that comes along will likely do the same. So that's a good sort of proactive approach, is getting it pre-appraised. You don't hear that very often either, but it's a good idea. Number two is credit mistakes. There's nothing more frustrating for a seller than to enter contract with a buyer who has a pre-approval letter and then goes out and makes mistakes and makes purchases before they close. So if you're a buyer and you have a pre-approval letter and you've been approved to buy a property, don't make any big purchases before the closing date. Wait until your loan clears before you buy the furniture and anything else that you may want to get, because it does impact your debt-to-income ratios, and that could potentially make your loan no longer closable, and your lender is going to see that on the final credit report before you close. And that's something that's happened a couple times this year. So definitely out of our control, but definitely something to avoid if you're a buyer. Number three, bad home inspections. You're under contract with a buyer. You think everything is great. You're moving along, and then the inspections happen within the first 10 days during the buyer due diligence period. That it uncovers some things that you weren't aware of as a seller, and it happens a lot actually. So sellers thinks their home is fantastic, and it is in many ways, but there's some things that haven't been uncovered, and it's just because you haven't looked in the attic, or you haven't looked in the crawl space, or you haven't done those thorough investigations on your own over the past 5, 10, 20 years. That's natural. So the inspector does, and their job is to find that stuff. And when they do, you're somewhat caught off guard. So my recommendation on that is, if they do uncover things that really should be right, you should probably make them right. If you don't, then you'll have to disclose it later on in the seller's disclosure statement. You'll have to make a buyer aware of it. Even better than that, though, is have your home pre-inspected. Spend a couple, $200 to $300 for a pre-inspection. They're not as expensive as a full-blown inspection, and you'll save yourself time, money, and headache. Because if you find something that's a problem, you can get it fixed on your own terms and not on the buyer's terms. So keep that in mind. If your home pre-inspected, it'll save you thousands of dollars because you're doing it before the home even hits the market. Number four, bank delays. So we've experienced this quite a bit. Lending is taking longer and loans are getting extended. And if a seller is not prepared for that conversation, or they think it's going to close on a certain date and it gets dragged out, that's frustrating. Everyone has plans to close in a certain time. So how do you avoid bank delays? You just make sure that there's more communication. Your agent needs to be communicating with the lenders, with all parties involved, to make sure this is moving along. If there's a clear indicator this is not going to close in the time frame that's indicated in the purchase agreement, then the seller should be in a position to back out of that contract, or be in a position to be more patient, understanding that going back on the market is going to create a lot more time to find a new buyer and go through all that again. It really depends on what's going on with that buyer, but be cautiously optimistic is the best way to describe that. And then lastly, a tense negotiation. So you're in a negotiation, buyer and seller can't quite agree, you're coming down to a few $1,000s. Just look at the big picture and realize that a couple $1,000s usually is not enough to have you either A, not move forward as a buyer, or B, not sell your home as a seller. Just consider what your alternatives are, and if you went back on the market as a seller in pursuit of a new buyer, are you going to end up in a better position? If you're a buyer and you're looking at a home that you really love and you're $2,000 apart, remember every $1,000 financed right now is $4 a month in payment. So that'd be about $8 a month. So the question is that home worth $8 a month? So ask yourself that as a buyer, and I think you'll find that the answer is yes, it's worth $8 more. So those are the quick, easy fixes for some potential hazards when you're selling and buying in this current market. I hope you find this video to be of value, and thanks for tuning in. We'll have another one coming out to you in the next couple weeks on KevinYoder.tv, and this is Kevin Yoder with the Yoder team. Make it a great day.